Tonight I'm going to be reading a review of a book named Truth and Truthfulness by Bernard Williams. And I'm interested in this because I've always been fascinated by this idea of truth, authenticity, singleness, whatever you want to call it, and what its anatomy basically is. And I was recently reading a memoir. I'm currently reading a memoir of someone I greatly admire, and I found that they, like me, had absolute zero tolerance for affectation of any sort. And I found this quite flattering because, oh, what does it say? I don't know if all that was just cut out, but I'll just go again. I'm going to be making a review of Truth and Truthfulness by Bernard Williams, which is a book on the nature of truth. And my interest in this has been revived recently from reading a memoir in which I found that one of my intellectual inspirations, hated any form of affectation in people as a trait. And this was quite flattering to me because a few years ago, 3 years ago, I made a video on here in which I was thinking of Dante's circles of hell and reflecting on why different kinds of sin were ranked as he does rank them. And I was challenging it because at the bottom, obviously, is treachery. But in my mind, I found affectation or pretense or a lack of an inability to present honestly ranks much lower than treachery in my mind. And that in part is because of my perception of human nature. I don't expect human beings to be loyal. Uh, I think it to be antithetical to their nature. Anyways, that's just my reflection. But the point is, reading that this person, whom I greatly admired, felt the same about affectation, caused me to revisit this topic. And I'm currently awaiting two books. One is Truth and Truthfulness by Bernard Williams, and the other is Truth, a Guide for the Perplexed by Simon Blackburn. But tonight I'll be reading a review of Truth and Truthfulness, and I'll try to do this really quickly as I await this book. I just felt I should do this tonight. Right, let's get into it then. Wait, I just find this topic quite interesting. I feel there's something there that I'm yet to grasp, and I feel reading these works will help me formalize my knowledge around this, because much of what I think of truth or its nature is just my thoughts. But I feel I was pleased to find it's actually quite it's one of the topics that's been greatly researched, and lots of people have very interesting insights on the anatomy of truth, and some do resonate just from reading notes and the backs of his books, and others don't. So I want to see if my thoughts resonate with some of these people, or if I'm thinking of something totally different. Either way, reading these I think will be a great starting point in formalizing my knowledge around this, because I feel it's something I'm deeply connected to, and I think it could speak to a lot more than just truth or honesty or authenticity as a trait, but could also reveal a lot more about uh, the nature of. Oh, I feel I couldn't even. Just of why truth is so greatly admired, or beauty, not just in others as a trait, but in essence, where we aspire to things that are truthful, that are single. And yeah, that's something I want to delve into. Okay, so I'll start the review. It wasn't the plan, but let's start. John Rawls may have made the most important systematic contribution to moral and political philosophy in the past half century, but there is a good argument to be made that Bernard Williams, who died in June 2003, was moral philosophy's most original thinker. Wow. Williams has drawn less scholarly attention than Rawls and attracted far fewer disciples, but that is in good part a consequence of the nature of his thought. He proceeded by suggestive and astute forays into many different areas rather than by laying out a general vision, And he was known for offering highly compressed arguments rather than the carefully elaborated arguments of Rawls. Rawls is a theory of justice in which he talks about the veil of ignorance. It is indeed not easy to say exactly what the philosophy of Bernard Williams as a whole amounts to. On the other hand, for ingenuity, provocativeness, breadth of knowledge, and sharp, elegant, highly memorable writing, there is no one to touch Williams. Okay, now I'm more excited to read this book. Williams is best known for short pieces that raise a question or offer an argument that no one. I'm going to read this really quickly, but I'll come back and revisit it. I just wanted to go through it quickly tonight. Forgive me if you're following, but this paper is available online. Williams is best known for short pieces that raise a question or offer an argument that no one has quite put that way before. It's exciting. In that capacity, he's responsible for some of the most important writings we have on personal identity, moral realism, and the failings of both utilitarianism and Kantianism. He did not generally sustain his views on any one of these themes over the course of an entire book, however. Rather, he inclined toward collections of essays like Problems of Self or Moral Lack. Even his Ethics and the Limits of Philosophy read more like a collection of pieces on various aspects of moral philosophy than a single sustained argument. Now we have Truth and Truthfulness, which sets out to be a single book-length argument offering a roughly Nietzschean genealogy of the two basic virtues of truth, which Williams calls accuracy and sincerity, in order to assess the claims made by the deniers of the importance of truth in today's academy. As I will argue shortly, it is not at all clear that the book succeeds in these terms. Once again, it is best read instead as a collection of separate forays into different aspects of truth and truthfulness, filled as always with brilliant nuggets of insight, not adding up to a clear overall vision of what function plays in our discourse. Truth-telling, as opposed to truth. I don't know if this is meant to be precisely to be read that way. More precisely, we might say that the book does very well with sincerity, but less with accuracy. It gives us one of the wisest and most plausible accounts of truth-telling as opposed to lying, to be found anywhere in recent philosophical literature. But lying is not what deniers praise, what the deniers praise, and the book is disappointing in its treatment of truth as opposed to myth or perhaps interpretation. Truth and Truthfulness falls essentially into three parts. The first 4 chapters examine what genealogy means and how it need not undermine what it explains, show how some notion of truth will be useful for basic survival purposes in any human community, and delineate the logical and epistemic relationships among truth, belief, and assertion. The next 2 chapters begin with the important observation that nothing much follows from the pragmatic and logical functions of truth, for rightness or wrongness, of lying, or being careless in one's search for truth. Williams therefore takes up the ethical issues surrounding sincerity and accuracy as a separate matter, laying out into 2 brilliant chapters a superb account of the degree to which truth-telling, conceived now as a part of the maintenance of human relationships, admits of exceptions, and the way in which the search for truth requires a resistance to wishful thinking. Williams' primary concern here is with how, on strictly naturalistic grounds, one can move from the instrumental value of truth-telling, that truth-telling has in the state of nature, to a view of sincerity and accuracy as having an intrinsic value. Okay, I like that. That's where my interest lies, and what the intrinsic, not even intrinsic value, but nature of truth is. What a question. And I don't like the Platonian definition. Okay. Finally, in the last 4 chapters of the book, Williams conducts investigations into the invention or discovery of historical time, the notion of authenticity, the role of truth in politics, and the distinction, between historical narratives and the mere chronicling of facts. Williams' gift for close reading of text informs these chapters, and they contain, among other insights, a set of judicious cautions against supporting that the liberal marketplace of ideas will necessarily be good for the spread of true belief. An excellent attempt to make precise sense of the project associated with critical theory of showing when a person should be said to believe something because those in power have manipulated her into doing so. But like the discussions of sincerity and accuracy, the concluding chapters do not have much to do with the explication of the role of truth in the first 4 chapters, nor do they connect very closely to one another. This matters because Williams initially promises to give us something considerable more than a collection of loosely related essays on truth. At the beginning of the book, he describes his project as an attempt to grapple with the great controversy that has raged in recent years between those who are dismiss the idea of truth and those who maintain in the nature of common sense that such dismissals are ridiculous. His account of both sides of this debate, moreover, is remarkably even-handed. We have no doubt that in the end, he will side with those who think there is such a thing as truth, and that it is important, but as he points out rightly, that the common sense party's attitude to the deniers is based on a misunderstanding. Notes that there are interesting ideas to consider among the deniers' materials and indicates the importance of truthfulness requires not to take deniers' claims far more seriously than the common sense party has done. So we are led to anticipate a thorough attempt to address the serious claims made by the deniers. Yeah, I'm glad he doesn't go into the because that's not where my interest is as well. So that's not a con for me, but the deniers in terms that they themselves might accept. It's an exciting prospect. Williams has superbly situated to take up such a subject. A philosopher steeped in so-called analytical tradition, who can yet cite Nietzsche and Barthes or Foucault approvingly, a philosopher with a vast knowledge of art and literature and brilliant interpretive skills in addition to his analytic rigor, who better to have enough sympathy for figures like Derrida to explain them clearly without being so sympathetic as to agree with them? We might reasonably expect for Williams to a deep theory or critique of truth that would offer us for the first time a path over the seemingly unbridgeable chasms in the contemporary academy. But anyone who does expect this will be disappointed. Oh, one way of expressing that is not that. For all the favorable invocations of Nietzsche, Williams defaults upon the major figures in the camp of those he calls the deniers. Derrida is not mentioned, nor is Stanley Fish, nor Mark Taylor, nor Paul Doman and Bruno Latour. I don't know if these are French names, appear but in passing. There is not even a discussion of any academic field other than history in which the denier's claims are taken seriously, although they are at least as important in literature, religion, and anthropology departments as they are in history, nor of the political movements that have associated themselves with these claims. The main representative of the deniers in Williams' book is Richard Rorty. He's not taken very seriously by most devout postmodernists and deconstructionists, except as a weapon to use against their analytic critics. Of course, Williams could have responded thoughtfully to the deniers without mentioning them by name. The deep problem with truth and truthfulness, it does not offer us a notion of truth that comes anywhere close to engaging with the deniers' concerns. Williams proposes to answer pragmatics like Rorty on their own ground by explicating the pragmatic function of the notion of truth in a human community. With this end in mind, he offers us a state of nature story in which human beings employ a notion of truth as part of a division of epistemic labor by which everyone gains more information about the world than he or she could possibly garner on their own. The information here is primarily, if not exclusively, empirical information gained by observation, by looking and seeing. Williams says people have positional advantages over one another in gathering such information, and that a basic function of language is the communication of such information so that we each can gain from positional advantages of others for our own positional disadvantages. He's surely right about all this, and he is, as he is to say that there is an insistence on the virtue of telling what one believes to be true, yeah, and of attempting to form that belief in responsible ways is essential for I hope he writes precisely and doesn't waste time. Because the review itself is drugging. I hope the book, oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, he's probably dead. I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry. He's surely right about all this, as he used to say that an insistence on the virtue of telling what one believes to be true, and of attempting to. I feel terrible when I write a review about someone who's living, because if it is in the least unflattering, I worry that one, they may not be welcoming of that criticism. Not that I'd be right, but whether I were right or wrong, they wouldn't be welcoming. And I hate that fact in itself, especially if it comes from ego as opposed to their belief that my criticism was wrong. Yeah, and that's usually the case because where people genuinely believe one's criticism to be misplaced or unsatisfactory, they wouldn't care. Their ego wouldn't be hurt. they would think the other person misled. So I hate that situation. I read a very interesting book on a philosophical justification of misanthropy early this year, and I enjoyed the first parts of it. And at some point, I thoroughly disagreed with the I just said the title, but that's fine. I, I thoroughly disagreed with many of the premises that were made later in the book because I felt they were emotionally driven. I felt the authors, who's a professor, by the way, at a university, and I was fighting the. I might have even drafted the email, a long email, because I was taking notes of all the points I felt the argument didn't follow from what they purported to be they purported to be claiming. And I, in the end, didn't send the email because I thought of all the time that was put into researching the book and writing it, and if this feedback was welcome, if it would be there was any utility in sending it. So I have those questions. So that's why I made that comment on this. I'll keep going. And if there's a point here, okay, where was I? He's surely right about all this. I'm going behind a bit. He's surely right about all this, as he used to say that an insistence on the virtue of telling what one believes to be true, of attempting to form that belief in responsible ways is essential for the system to work. And if the point here is responsible ways, and if the point here is simply to show, if the point here is simply to show contra some of the more extreme of the deniers that there is some point to using the term truth and some truth to tell, then Williams has won his case. This is not really what is in the mind of most deniers, Williams himself acknowledges when he dismisses the common sense response to their complaints. And one has only to take the state of nature story a small step further than he does to see its severe limitations. Certainly, one basic function of language is to help us pool empirical information. That is hardly its only function. Before language arose, human beings could pool information only to a very limited degree, and it is plausible to suppose that at first language did little more than improve our ability to accomplish this task. The arrival of language itself quickly makes it possible, however, to start expressing thoughts like, I love you, marrying two sisters is wrong, we must sacrifice to the gods, and everything we sense is illusory. Reality cannot be sensed. None of these, it reads a lot like Wittgenstein. None of these things are reports of observations. Some of them, okay, some none of these are reports of observations. Some of them cannot, in principle, be reduced to such reports. The others are unlikely to be so reduced without losing something essential to their meaning. It is precisely with sentences like these that most fights about truth break out, both among philosophers and in ordinary life. Knowledge makes it possible to form thoughts and to try to achieve knowledge of objects that are not open to observation, of which position or branch is irrelevant. But it is the thoughts so formed and sentences express them that lead to the seemingly irredeemable conflicts that impress the deniers. We're expanding this objection is consider the unsatisfactory argument Williams offers in his defense of the secular historical time in chapter 7. Williams admits that nothing about his state of nature story should lead us to think that the people in this imagined state need to have the same objective conception of the past as we have, that they will share the conception we, the enlightened West, presumably have of historical time. Still, it turns out that such an objective conception of time is supposed to graft naturally onto the notion of truth, or might, from the state of nature. Williams uses his claim to challenge those who would offer a relativistic approach to the writing of history. Chapter 7 offers a brilliant analysis of the difference between the Herodotus and Thucydides, described as largely legendary figure minus of Crete, arguing that Herodotus did not yet have the notion of historical time as a rigid and determinate structure of the past, in which past events must be treated just like present ones. And this is present in Thucydides. It is not therefore Herodotus. It is not therefore that Herodotus had a different conception of historical time, or correspondingly of legend and myth. Instead, he lacked any clear conception of either one. He had not yet asked what the kind of question is appropriate to the everyday about legendary stories. But one that kind of but once the kind of question does get asked, and it does by Thucydides, there's no way that legendary stories can be regarded as true anymore, nor will it be possible to treat legendary beings as real. Once the structure of historical time is in place, the gods will eventually blow out. once the Thucydidean question is put to these stories, we recognize that the very use of general terms requires that we see past events as the present ones. If we say that there was in a past time a battle or a king giving orders or a fleet, then what we believe to have happened to people we must resemble in relevant and intelligible respects the way things are now. Hence, we should not say that Herodotus's quasi-mythical style of history was true for the Greeks of his time, while the secular history is true for later peoples. Rather, we should say that Herodotus had not yet developed a conceptual repertoire by which properly to assess mythical stories as true. That's interesting, or false, and that when someone like Thucydides introduced the repertoire, it was clear both now. Yes, this is obvious though, and now how to access such stories for truth. As we assess stories about here and now, and what truth value they had. Oh yes, okay. There's no route back from scientific history once introduced. No longer be rational to treat later stories as true or the entities they contain as real. But is there really no route back from scientific history? Williams implies that in fact legendary beings faded from history once the objective conception of time was introduced. But that is just false. Secular history did not replace the retelling of legends after Thucydides. Even among people who studied Thucydides' work, St. Augustine, historian of Norman critical skill, took for granted that there had been earlier ages, an age of the first people, an age of the prophets, and so forth, which things were radically different from the way things are now. Augustine was, of course, simply following the presentation of the Hebrew Bible in this, and rabbinic thought in the time similarly maintained that an earlier age of prophecy had been replaced by the current age of wisdom, in which God no longer spoke directly to the people and manifested himself generally in miraculous ways. These views draw precisely the kind of distinction in types of time that Williams says was ruled out after Thucydides, with precisely the consequence that one divine being, at least, did not bow out of history. And mainstream Christians and Jews continued to write history in just such a way until almost 2,000 years after Thucydides, when Hobbes, Spinoza, and Hume made anything but Thucydidean history intellectually disreputable in Europe. But Spinoza, incredible. So it is hard to make, as are the others, and Hobbes and Hume. So it is hard to make sense of Williams' account of this. Yes, I was reading Spinoza recently. So it is hard to make sense of Williams' account of the notion of historical, but my favorite would be Hobbes, obviously. So it is hard to make sense of Williams' account of the notion of historical time as a description of a historical fact. It makes better sense if it has a normative point. After the Thucydides, Williams may want to say nobody should have written histories according to which God or the gods interacted with humans. This is a reasonable claim, of course, but it's hard to see how the arguments Williams has given us to do much to support it. As he himself admits, the state of nature story only does not require a state of nature story alone does not require that we have a homogeneous conception of historical time. And the claim that the use of general terms entails homogeneous historical time is weak. It is true that there needs to be a great deal of similarity between a battle now and a battle in the past. For us to use the word battle to describe both events, we surely claim that Athena helped or God helped the Israelites in an ancient battle is not a great difference. We cannot so much as understand the ancient event so described as a battle. Modern battles will, in a sense, in any case, greatly differ. Why should the purported relation of the divine being be a difference that makes the word lose its application altogether? Okay. Interesting. Altogether. Maybe good reason, including theological ones, not to suppose that this is actually very interesting. A good reason not to suppose that either Athena or God will participate in battles with the applicability of general terms. This is actually similar to what the hermeneutical spiral is saying. This is similar to what's being said in the hermeneutical spiral on how to interpret a word used in a specific context. including the royal consort, suppose that either Athena or God would participate in battles, but the applicability of general terms is not among them. The adequacy of William's attempt to suggest pre-modern ways of writing history is but one instance of the general problem that he says almost nothing about how the truth of explanations relates to the truth of reporting, nothing in particular to defend the naturalism he seems to regard as essential to any truthful explanation. This is a great failing because the quarrel between the deniers and the critics turns, in many cases, precisely on the role of naturalism in rational explanation. Okay, perhaps it was too much to expect that Williams could resolve the fierce and knotty quarrel. His failure to do so doesn't make truth and truthfulness something of a disappointment, given the goal it initially sets for itself. Does make. See, don't be overambitious. It seems a bit childish to criticize him for not achieving his very ambitious, as I said, the very ambitious goal, when he has given us so much wisdom and insight throughout his career, as much as ever in the last fascinating book on the topic is always by Williams, vast, enduring importance. Thank you, Samuel Fleischacker of the University of Illinois, Chicago. This is the next book, Reverence. Renewing a Forgotten Virtue. Okay, thank you very much. That was the review of Truth and Truthfulness. I can't wait to read it. I feel I have a general sense of the book now, but I'm still eager to engage with it myself. Perhaps it won't be for these arguments, but more for, he says he's a fascinating philosopher, and I think I'm keen to see what his style is, how he distinguishes between accuracy and sincerity. Was that it? Sincerity, yeah, accuracy and sincerity. That was the most interesting part for me, most consistent with what I'm trying to find out about. Okay, that was my review of this book. Merci beaucoup. Thanks a lot for watching, and catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.